these days.
Welcome back to People You Should Know, presented by Octus. I'm Jenny Bain. Today's guest has spent almost 30 years in finance, but the more interesting thing about him might be everything else. He was born in Anchorage, Alaska, to two doctors who decided to spend a couple of years there before settling down in what he calls a northern exposure situation. After Harvard, he started his career at Goldman Sachs in 1997. He's been at one of the most respected names in private credit for almost a decade, and he hosts a podcast that's 13 seasons deep. He's also a home cook who handles almost every meal at his house. He's a guitar player who almost passed on a job to take a standing gig on Bleecker Street. And he is the husband of a woman who basically introduced pickleball to New York City. He has 3 kids, 2 older sisters, and a Thanksgiving guest list that hits almost 30 people every year. Today, please welcome Colbert Cannon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a treat to be here, and what a great intro.
I know, thank you. I love reading them because I'm like, oh, I can't wait to discuss all that's about to come.
I'm regretting giving you inside information already. You know, like I've made some critical mistakes here.
Oh, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse from here. There's a lot of places we could start, but let's just start with Alaska.
Sure.
That's where your story starts, and I think that people may not know that much about that part of your life. So set it up for me. How did you end up born there?
Yeah, I actually think about this sometimes in my own life. So my parents were both doctors. They just finished their residency at Mass General. I have 2 older sisters, as you said, and I think they were 3 and 4 years old at the time. And my father, he's a doctor, but he's always been quite an accomplished pilot. Like he soloed a glider when he was 14 years old.
14.
He always,
Is that legal?
That's literally the first age it's legal, which by the way is crazy. I mean, having had 14-year-old children, I don't think they should be up in the sky by themselves, let alone something that doesn't even have an engine. He loves flying. And if you love to fly, you know, they call it the sourdough sky up in Alaska. It's this like incredible, scenery, as you can imagine, these bush pilots up there. Joined up with something called the Native Public Health Service, which is technically, it's a government service providing healthcare to Native American populations, in this case, literally the Inuit. And so there's these crazy photos of my father on a Cessna on skis flying into these remote reservations, providing healthcare to a whole village. He always says he learned an impossible amount because you're like the only doctor they're going to see for months. You can imagine you just get thrown into the deep end and you have to figure it all out.
You have to be a generalist.
Totally.
Also, yeah.
Why I think about it is in a similar age, you know, we have 3 children as well. And I think when my oldest were 3 and 4, if I had pitched my wife, hey, let's move to Alaska for a couple of years, I don't think it would have gone that well. But
so your mom was just like,
she's always been up for a good adventure. And so we went up there. I was born in Anchorage. We spent time in Anchorage and then in a town called Bethel. And it's funny when you talk to actual Alaskans, I mean, I was born there, but I can't certainly call it home. I left when I was under 4 years old. Anchorage is one thing. Living in Bethel is deeply credentializing. I mean, I think even today it's a city of like 7,000 people. Like it couldn't be smaller.
do you go back?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
No, there's not a lot to do in Bethel really, but that's like the real deal. I mean, they were basically from October to May, you basically couldn't get there anyway other than by plane. Like it's really remote. So yeah, an incredible experience certainly for my parents. It's neat to have been born there. But no, I grew up in North Carolina where we moved when I was, 3.5, 4. That was where my formative years were down there.
And right, all your memories are there. And you said your 2 parents are doctors.
Yep.
Growing up in North Carolina, were they pushing you to go the doctor route, or were they just like, you know what, go outside with your peers and figure it out?
It's interesting. Quite the contrary. They had a whole sort of speech, in fact, for my friends who were really interested in medicine, where they basically could see how things were evolving in medicine. And they were very clear on like, listen, if you love this and it's your passion, God bless, but you've got to be really, really passionate about it in order for it to make sense. And so they knew. It's funny, none of the 3 of us, my sisters and I, ended up in medicine because it just wasn't like, we didn't have the same draw that they did.
And all 3 of you, I think, do different thing. Your sister is at KPMG.
Yep.
Another sister is a podcaster.
That's right. She's a radio personality and podcaster herself. Yeah. So my oldest sister married a Norwegian gentleman, lives in Norway, and works at KPMG there. And my middle older sister, TC, works with Michael Smerconish, who has his show on Sirius XM and has her own podcast, TC After Dark, which is well worth checking out. So yeah, it's a little bit of the family business.
I was going to say, well, we'll get to that. I have a few questions about that later. But what were you guys like as kids? Were you close, or you were the youngest?
I was the youngest. Yeah. It's funny. We replicated my same family with the 3 kids. And so I understand my youngest, my son, very well, because it's basically the house that I grew up in. And I have to say, it's funny. You get spoiled a lot as the youngest. It's probably bad as a credit investor. I have a naturally sort of optimistic side to me where I'm like, oh, everything's going to work out fine, because it always does. You know what I mean? Like you just grow up with this, huge sense of entitlement. You're like, oh, it's going to work out. Like what could possibly go wrong?
This is my baby brother.
Exactly.
I won't play house with him.
Exactly.
And nurture him.
So we were a very tight-knit family, traveled a lot as a family, and had just great times together and remained close as a family.
That's amazing. Skipping a little bit ahead, you went to Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
You thought you might be a lawyer.
Yes.
I was going to say, what went wrong? No
Yeah.
kidding. What changed your mind?
Yeah. No, it's funny. I thought that what was most interesting, I just thought sort of deal making was interesting. Like literally, as silly as this sounds, like I saw the movie Wall Street. And
I was
like,
going to
oh,
ask,
these guys are like doing deals. Like, this is cool. I didn't even know what that meant, really. I mean, I was like, yeah, I went to like public school in North Carolina. Like I had no frame of reference for any of this stuff. And I got to college and I was like, well, I'll become a lawyer because those are like the deal guys, right? Those are the guys who are doing interesting stuff. And as I sort of progressed, I graduated college in 97. It was very different back then than now. The on-campus recruiting, this is right before sort of the early internet. Internet 1.0 was sort of 99 timeframe. All those folks, a lot of people went out to San Fran. Basically on campus at Harvard, there was consulting and there was investment banking recruiting. And it was clear from friends who were older that what I thought was the most interesting stuff that lawyers did, M&A bankers were probably doing more of it. And so I was lucky enough to get a job with Goldman in their M&A group right out of school. This was pre-IPO Goldman, private partnership, like a very different place than it is today, quite a bit smaller, very tight-knit, and culturally like a really cool place. It was very team-driven. It was an intense environment, certainly, but it was very collaborative. And I came in with no frame of reference on any of this stuff. I was like a full liberal arts concentrator. I had no idea. I mean, people are so much better prepared now than in my era. And they took a flyer on me and it was fantastic, like a really great experience.
And thinking you were going to be a lawyer, you might have been prepared for that structured environment of big law or whatever it looked like back then. So you had to have been prepared a little bit for the intensity that it could be, right?
For that part, I was certainly prepared. But for the actually knowing a single thing about finance or accounting, so I majored in, it's funny, I laugh about this every time I see it in my bio. At Harvard, there's a concentration, a major called social studies. And it's basically the equivalent of the British system they call PP&E, philosophy, politics, and economics. And it's just a broad liberal arts education. But social studies is actually a terrible name. Like it sounds like it's like your fifth grade civics class or partying. You know what I mean? Like it's like social studies. You're like, what are we doing here? But again, like all I did was read the great books and think about philosophy and, governance structures and all this stuff. And they got thrown in the deep end and how to figure out a 3-statement model and how to use Excel. So
someone really did take a chance on you.
Yeah. Again, different time. I don't think anybody was as prepared as these kids are now. But yeah, worked out great.
Well, I think you probably earned it as well because eventually you were promoted to associate. And something I wanted to ask you about, I thought it was very interesting, is you did not go back for your MBA.
No.
And that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe a less traditional path. People really feel the urge, the pull to do that, and they'll be more credentialed. But looking back, do you wish you'd gone, or do you feel that was the right move?
Yeah, it was definitely the right move for me. And I'll give you one caveat on that. So I didn't because, again, remember I was saying it was Internet 1.0. So when I was a third-year analyst, everybody was going to like make their fortune in Silicon Valley. And there were some people who were incredibly successful doing that and went to Facebook early or eBay early or whatever. But then there was also, Webvan and Urban Fetch. And these are names that young listeners are going to have no idea what that means. But these were like the spectacular failures of early internet. And because Goldman was so worried about losing people to that, they offered direct promotion for good third-year analysts. They said, well, fine, you don't need to go to business school, just stay on. And to me, it was really sort of an opportunity cost math of, well, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for a couple of years and it's 2 years out of the workforce. And importantly, I think business school is best if you're figuring out what you want to do. Like I knew what I was doing was what I wanted to do. Exactly. So I was like, why take that time? Now, I will say the part that's unfair about this, you mentioned my wife. We got married when I was relatively young. I mean, I was married when I was 24, which by like modern standards is insane.
But babies.
Exactly.
Children.
But she went to business school. She was 02 from HBS. And so
we were married while she went to business school.
When she went to business school.
Front row seat to it.
And I say that because I actually got some of the ancillary benefits of business school, because so much of it is the network and the people you know. And I know all their classmates really well. And I got a real advantage out of that. So in fairness, I probably got some of the ancillary benefits without actually going. It's a personal call for everybody. For me, it was 100% the right decision.
Also, I assume you're studying with your wife or helping her, like advising her on certain topics that you might know more about than as she's studying them. I don't know.
It's kind of you to suggest that I know something more than my wife.
Trying to throw you a bone there.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be clear, my wife was an investment banking analyst with me at Goldman. I'm not sure there's many areas that I know more than she does. But no, I mean, she ended up going down a different path. She did real estate private equity and then later started this pickleball business, which we can talk about.
Oh, it's coming.
But listen, it is a true blessing. I always say to anybody, younger folks, I couldn't enjoy spending more time with my wife than I do. Like she's the best, but also it's really nice to be able to talk about like things because she understands this. You know what I mean? Like I can have real work conversations and I can do the same with her work. Not everybody has that luck in their relationships and it's really lovely. Like it's very nice to be able to have that connection.
I love that. And we'll talk more about her too. I did tell my husband about the pickleball. He's on a big pickleball kick right now.
Just having a moment.
And I was like, I'll get back to you on where we should be going.
There you go.
You moved to Boston
Yes.
eventually, and I'm going to butcher the company you were working for?
Audax Group.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
No, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you have done that pivot again? Is that part of your story?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I was going into my second year as an associate in banking, and banking it's a demanding pursuit. It's actually a crazy and true story. I actually missed the rehearsal dinner for a dear friend, and because of a deal I was working on, I was able to make it to the wedding, but not the rehearsal dinner. And I was like, well, this job's dumb. Like any job that requires you to miss a good friend's rehearsal dinner, because there was literally like no way I could make it work. I was like, it's time to move on. And I ultimately was getting more interested in being an investor than being essentially everything that I loved about banking was great. But once you made a recommendation, once you consummated a deal, then you were sort of done. You didn't actually live with any of the implications of something you'd done, right?
You see your baby through and then it's just over. Yeah,
exactly. And so to me, the chance to move to the investing side was really interesting. As you mentioned, my wife was going to business school. We'd actually spent a year commuting back and forth between Boston and New York, and that was also getting old. After that wedding weekend, on that Monday morning, I got a call from a headhunter who said, hey, there's this job at this private equity firm in Boston. Would you like to talk to them? I was like, oh, isn't that
funny,
fortuitous, right? So no, it was a wonderful experience. I would also say, of the many things that I took away from Audax, so Audax was one of the early spinouts of Bain Capital. The two principals who founded it, Jeff Rennett and Mark Walpo, were both ex-Bain Capital guys. And I say that because the other thing that I think you can really get an advantage of out of business school, in particular for the finance types, is sort of the business operations, sort of more consulting type stuff where you're like, okay, well, how do businesses actually work? It makes you a better investor. It makes you ask better questions the next time around, all that. And Audax had that Bain heritage where there were a bunch of consultants around who are my colleagues. We were very focused on operational improvements. And I learned a ton. Forget being a good investor, just like understanding how business work. I was like seconded to a CFO's office for 6 months. You learn a lot in that I got a real benefit out of. So that was a wonderful experience. And I love living in Boston. Yeah, we were there for 5 years before we came back to New York.
So you're sort of building your repertoire of skills and credibility too. And you do end up going out and doing your own thing.
Well, so that was the second step after this. So I came back to New York to join Glenview Capital. So I got an opportunity to join a hedge fund here in New York where they were building a credit investing business focused on both public and private credit. So I was there from 2006 to 2012. By the end, I was running the credit investing business for Glenview, but it was primarily an equity-focused hedge fund. And it was clear to me that I wanted to be where what I did was the entirety of what the firm did as opposed to a subset, because you can sort of be in and out of favor when you're not the sort of core focus. So in 2012, I joined up with some other folks in the business, and we launched our own hedge fund called Wingspan Investment Management, which we managed for about 5 years. And that business is tough. You got to scale it. We got to about $1 billion in AUM, but never quite got past that. Good first couple of years, mediocre last couple of years. In 2016, it was time to move on. But that's the story there.
There's a lot to unpack there, and we don't have all the time. But what was it like running your own thing? That's a whole different set of skills, and I feel like it probably taught you a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if you consider it a win or what, but just, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I consider it a win, and like as with any of these things, you learn a ton from it. Like it was not the professional success that we had hoped for. It's funny, first of all, you end up having to just sort of learn how to do everything. Like I always used to laugh when we'd interview people where it'd be like, okay, if we bring on this kid, will they fix the copier when it breaks, or are they going to think they're too big time for that? Because if you are, then you need to stay at a big firm. And if you're not, we had, I think at our peak, we were 12 or 13 employees, right?
Like everyone wears many hats.
Everybody does everything.
You're in the weeds.
Exactly. And so you're either bought into that program or you're not, and not everybody is wired the right way for that. I learned a ton about what it's like to build a business. I respect so much the middle and back office aspects of that job are really time consuming and distracting. And it's a real blessing when you can be somewhere where that's a incredibly efficient organization like we have where I am today. But no, it was a fantastic experience. I couldn't have learned more, couldn't have enjoyed my colleagues more. It just didn't quite ramp and was as successful as we'd hoped it would be.
But it sounds like a startup, right?
That's and Startup 101, right? That's the way these things work.
Ego out the door
Totally.
and taught you so much. And so HPS came through your old college friend, I think.
Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah. So I'll tell you the story. I was looking for what I wanted to do next as we were winding down Wingspan. And I'd reached out to Mike Patterson, who's one of the governing partners of HPS. I'd known him since college. I've known him forever. Really just looking for sort of career advice. He's a very thoughtful guy. Generally, he's obviously been very successful. And we started talking about a range of things. I was looking at going and sort of building a credit investing business at a larger fund. I'll never forget this because I had done sort of special sits and more opportunistic credit investing for both the public and private side. And he said, Colbert, I think the most interesting things to happen in credit, in particular in sort of more opportunistic credit over the next 10 years, going to be on the private credit side, not in the hedge fund model. And this is like 2015, 16 timeframe. I give him a ton of credit for prescience there. That was not my correct prediction.
But you had to trust him.
I
You
did,
trusted that.
but I'll tell you, I didn't just trust him. It was really a lucky situation. So that if you think about the senior principals of HPS, the CEO, Scott Kapnick, he had been a Goldman partner. He and I had actually worked on a deal together in the late 90s. He definitely doesn't remember me because I was like a 21-year analyst.
But you remembered him.
But I remember him. And he's a lovely guy who really embodies the old school Goldman partner culture, that sort of real team driven. He's very understated Midwest guy. He's great.
Yeah, humble.
Yeah, the guy who runs the junior capital business at HPS is a gentleman named Scott French. He and I did work on deals together in the late 90s at Goldman, and he did actually remember me. Okay. And then in the really funny one, Purnima Puri, who runs our public business, her husband, I'd worked for him at Glenview for a couple of years, right, like before the crisis. And I say all that in service of what really de-risked it the most for me was that I knew and really trusted the senior principals, that they're really smart, talented people who are also really committed towards building that sort of team-driven culture that we've been happy to be able to embody for the last couple of years. Then there just happened to be this massive tailwind to our business that thankfully we were able to take advantage of. But the structure was set up for me to be successful in a way that was really interesting.
Before we transition, I just really have to comment on the fact that you use the word team and team building and culture to describe how you've made a lot of your decisions and things that you value. And just as an HR business partner at the company, it warms my little people heart.
Well, no, I will say, listen, I'm a big believer in the wisdom of crowds, and I think that people make better decisions in groups. And in order for that to work, you need to hire really talented people, because the problem with that model is if somebody's going to freeload off of the next guy, like, it doesn't work. And so you need all people who are all bought into that in order for it to make sense. And that's where I really give a lot of credit to senior leadership. That starts top down, and they've always set a culture that's valued. And I think we get to better answers, for ourselves and for our investors because of it.
It is a team sport, if you will.
Absolutely.
People might not equate that. But so a year and a half ago, the whole thing sort of shifts again. Yep. So HPS merges with BlackRock.
Yes.
Suddenly you're now inside a firm that manages like $14 trillion.
It's my favorite sentence that my parent company manages $14 trillion in assets, because it's so patently absurd. Like, you can't actually,
is that right?
No, you can't contextualize those numbers. It's absurd.
Yeah, I could not quantify that for you at all. So I kind of want to sit with that for a second. Yeah. Right, it does sound absurd. It's a very different kind of, I don't know, is it a different kind of environment? Like, what's actually changed for you since the merger, if anything?
Yeah.
What does a day feel like for you now versus a year and a half ago?
Yeah. So on one level, nothing changed in a really good way. We spent a long time as we were structuring the deal, making sure that we could keep the sort of the culture as we've talked about, but also just the processes that have made us successful. So I honestly think if you're a 30-year-old on our team, I don't think your life really changed much. Your investment committee processes are the same. Your investment committee members are the same. That it's all the same stuff. In a very profound way, everything changed. And maybe it's worth 2 seconds on sort of how I spend my time at the firm, because it's relevant for this. I sit on the investing team on the direct lending side, so senior private credit. Our business unit, which is legacy HPS plus the legacy credit alternatives businesses at BlackRock, now manages about $385 billion in assets. About 40% of those sit in senior private credit, and that's where I sit. But I also have another hat I wear, which is I'm one of our co-heads of origination. So my partner Grishma Parekh and I co-head this group. She and her team manage the relationships with our financial sponsors that we deal with, private equity firms. And I manage our relationships with banks and the financial advisory firms, about 130 globally. And the reason I bring that up is, of the many reasons why we decided that BlackRock was the right answer versus the myriad other options we were considering, the power of that platform is pretty hard to overstate. You mentioned one, right? $14 trillion in assets. They're one of, if not the biggest fee payer to Wall Street. And so the connectivity with the banks and the benefit that gives to your firm is hard to overstate. It's 25,000 people globally. I mean, I'm going to be down in Mexico City, as we were talking before the recording started, next week, or 2 weeks, for some investor meetings. And we used to go down with a gentleman on our investor relations team who speaks Spanish, helpful. But, you go down there now and there's 300 people for BlackRock that have been in Mexico City for 25 years. It's a totally different level of connectivity. Or we lend to public companies all the time. Not everybody in our line of work does. Many people in private credit focus mostly on the private equity channel. Well, you want to accelerate your connectivity with the public world. You partner with somebody who owns 4% of every public stock on the planet. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of the connectivity, deal flow, origination benefits of the 20
Scale.
reasons. The 20 reasons why we thought BlackRock was the right answer. Like, that was a really, really important one of them. So it's been great. I'm like a kid at a candy store. There's so much within this organization. Like, once a week, I'll find out some new initiative where I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I got to get dialed into that. And it lets us, I think, really accelerate and increase the benefits that we've had from our success historically.
I'm thinking I have a question later that I wanted to ask you more so on the personal side of things, but just hearing you say like a kid in a candy shop, like how do you manage your time if there's something you want to dial into, as you say, like you have to give something else up. It must be hard to do with all that opportunity.
Yeah, it is. And we get pulled in a lot of directions. Lord, it's 25,000 employees. So you can imagine there's some bureaucracy and infrastructure that we sort of sorted through. These are really good problems. You know what I mean? Like none of this, you're not going to hear a single complaint from me about how to manage that, because I think it's incredibly interesting.
On the topic of private credit, real quick, it's, I think, more than I've ever noticed, and I work for Octus, but just in the news.
Oh, is there something going on?
Yeah. There's a lot of hot takes, and I'm not an expert. Remember, I'm on the people team, but I think it's interesting to ask from your perspective, the headlines, everything. What are people getting wrong? What are they getting right? I don't know, but wrong.
Yeah, maybe take a step back for those who, if you've been reading the financial press, you'd read a lot about private credit. And I do think if you live through one news story in your life that you know intimately that is well covered, or is that covered? I'll say, it'll make you slightly suspicious of anything in the press, because you're like, oh no, like there's a lot wrong, and as much as there was right in this. So let's take a step back. Well, how do we get to where we are, right? There was a series of high-profile frauds about a year and a half ago, right? First Brands, Tricolor, and it raised a question mark of, well, hold on a second, is there a problem in private credit? Now, to be clear, $2 trillion asset class, private credit. Those were broadly syndicated, publicly traded debt deals that had these trade finance private credit deals that went wrong, where the frauds were committed. And I'm not in any way minimizing those, but those happen, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Enron and WorldCom, and like these are things that come out at the end of long expansionary cycles. But that raised an eyebrow, and Jamie Dimon comes out and starts talking about cockroaches, a comment he later clarified to say that he was talking about his own portfolio, to be clear, not private credit. But, what's the line, the lies halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on? Like, it was one of those, right? It was just everywhere. Then in the wake of that, we had the reassessment of the value of software businesses in a post-AI world, something that's totally appropriate. I mean, it's a very rapidly changing world, and reassessing enterprise value there makes sense. And many private credit practitioners over-indexed into software. So that then raised another eyebrow of, well, hold on a second, is there a problem here? That then led to these big redemptions out of these BDCs and all of that. So what does that all mean for your question? Like what's right and what's wrong? I would say it this way. It is a $2 trillion asset class. And so to suggest that it's monolithic and that all the trends are the same across that is, of course, absurd. So are there parts of private credit that got really frothy and we came up with documents that weren't the promise of private credit versus broadly syndicated, where pricing was tighter, where recovery rates are going to be worse than what people said in sort of flow private equity financings? Yes, surely. Where do I worry a lot less? Bigger businesses. In all seriousness, if you have a $50 to $100 million financing need where it's a clean, easy to understand leveraged buyout, without exaggeration, there are over 100 firms who can give you that capital. Like, it's incredibly competitive. But if you go an order of magnitude bigger, 500 million to $1 billion, and you induce any sort of complexity, maybe it's a public company, maybe it's a corporate carve-out, it's non-sponsored, whatever it is, there's less than a handful of firms globally who can give it to you. I was on a panel last year, and a gentleman in our line of work referred to what he did in private credit as proprietary. And I basically started laughing. I was like, come on, man, like, it's finance. Everything's competitive. And so it's always been our goal just to be where it's less competitive, not necessarily that we lack competition. So I think there are flow parts of private credit that are going to feel worse in the next 5 years than they probably thought they would. Yeah. I think there's more bespoke kind of private credit that I feel totally fine about. And I think that their software re-rating is completely appropriate, but also takes time to play out. And, we're going to see how, in the same way that private credit's not a monolithic asset class, neither is software. There are businesses that are absolutely beneficiaries out of the AI revolution as well.
I could ask you many questions on the AI front too, but I feel it's been overdone. I just learned a lot from that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to take a very sharp transition here to something that we can both relate to. And that is, you are a podcast host yourself. You know what it's like to sit on the other side of this. You've had 130 episodes, 13 seasons. How many years is that, by the way?
We started in Q1 of 2020. So we're like 6 years in now. It's
okay. So a couple seasons a year.
Yeah.
What have you learned sitting on the other side of the mic from people that you interviewed, or about the entire experience?
Yeah. So we started it right before COVID hit. I mentioned Scott Kapnick, our CEO. Yeah. It's a funny story. I gave a talk at one of our conferences, and I came off the stage in the fall of 2019, and he said, "Colbert, you got a good voice," which is a really weird thing for your boss to say to you. I was like, where are we going?
Yeah,
exactly. It was like, do I need to call HR? What's about to happen? And his idea, which I give him a lot of credit for, it's really hard for firms like us to advertise or brand ourselves. I mean, it's just not how it works, really. But we thought that if we hosted a podcast where we talked to portfolio company CEOs, big investors in our fund, interview them about their lives, how they spend their time, and it would give insights into who we are and how we operate in a sort of a more organic way. And the original use case really was for our investors. We thought we'd put it in the data room and they could get some interesting insights and all of that. And what I hadn't thought about, as a people person, you'll appreciate this, for both recruiting and onboarding. If you're going to interview in Scott French's group, you're going to listen to his podcast. Like, it just makes complete sense. Or even, if you want to understand what we're doing in our asset-based finance business, you can listen to an interview that the leaders of that business did. So it's been really fun, honestly, and I very much enjoyed it. I've learned a ton. I mean, I'll give you maybe one specific lesson. The other deal I cut with Scott was, so he originally wanted me to do it weekly, and I was like, listen, man, I got a day job. Like, I just can't. And so we do these 10-episode blocks as seasons, as you said. But the other deal I cut was at least once a season, I just want to interview somebody who I think is interesting, who's at best got a tangential connection to HPS. Like, I just,
your choice.
Yeah, I can go a little off script. So I interviewed the restaurateur, Danny Meyer, famously of Shake Shack and Union Square Cafe and all that. It's probably my favorite interview I ever did. And one of his points, this really stuck with me. I asked him about how he builds his culture of hospitality. For those who aren't as familiar, he's very famous for, you walk into Union Square Cafe and it's the first time you've ever been there and they make you feel like you're a regular. He has this whole speech
That's a
about,
brand.
He's like, people remember the food, but people really remember how you felt. He started Union Square Cafe in the early 80s when the model for fine dining in New York was these high-end French restaurants where it was very snooty and it was very didn't feel hospitable at all. I said, how do you do that? Like, how do you create that culture? And he dove in because, of course, he thinks very carefully about this. And he's like, listen, there's intentionality to it, right? It doesn't just happen. And one of the many things he said that really stuck with me is he goes, listen, nobody knows how much you pay each individual. He's like, of course, on some level, they might compare notes, but like people generally don't know comp, but everybody knows who you promote. And if you promote somebody who's a jerk, then it's going to suggest to everybody that you got to be a jerk to be successful. And if you promote people who are good culture carriers and understand hospitality, then it sets the tone that that's the right one. And I thought that was actually incredibly perceptive because that's beyond restaurant, regardless of what you're in. That's just true, right? Like nobody knows if a VP is at the high end of the range, the low end of the range, up to other than a small group of people firm. But everybody knows that person makes executive director or not. You know what I mean?
It's
like
very
that's
public.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. No, I love it, man. I get a chance to like interview really interesting people and ask them really interesting questions. I mean, self-described really interesting questions, but I get to ask them all these questions about their lives. I love it. Like, what a treat. I have so much fun with it.
How do you, like Danny Meyer, for example, did you just call him up or did you have a connection?
I'll digress because this is actually a funny story. I know him a little bit, not well. Our kids went to school together. And so I asked him, and it was right after COVID. And he was like, listen, still recovering from COVID, restaurateur, I can't do it. The previous season, one of my one-offs was I interviewed a gentleman named Amor Tolles. Amor is a fascinating story. If you ever read a book called A Gentleman in Moscow or Lincoln Highway, he's written a number of really wonderful books.
I haven't read them.
Rules of Civility. I love them. He was a 25-year finance guy in New York and would tell everybody who would listen that he was going to write the next great American novel. And everybody was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then wrote 3 New York Times bestsellers. And you're like, well, maybe 4 now. And you're like, okay.
My bad.
Turns out he's good at a lot of things. Amor might be Union Square Cafe's most beloved customer. I'm telling you, I go there not infrequently. And 80% of the time I'm there, he's like sitting there somewhere. Like he loves it. He treats it like his kitchen. So I did the interview with him. And at the end, I do a thing called Best Ideas where I offer up a recommendation. And for my best idea, I did Union Square Cafe because I love it. It's still executing at an unbelievable level. I then sent that recording to Danny and I said, listen, I'm going to bother you exactly one more time. I thought you'd like this with your, one of your favorite customers. And 3 days later, he texted me and goes, okay, I'm in.
I played
the long game.
You gave him something.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you are in a conversation like that and curious, just because it's happened to me, do you go off script? And if you do, how do you find your way back? Like you're just in a really interesting conversation. You're like, oh God, we didn't plan for this.
It's funny. I script it out pretty carefully, just to have something that I know I can always fall back on. And it just helps me just frankly from a cadence of the interview perspective. But no, I absolutely go off script because they'll say something that'll jog some memory or something like that, which is great. But no, I like having something in front of me just to remember where I am in the progress.
Yeah, if it's a good conversation, it's a good monopoly. Keep it going.
100%.
Here's a little fun part for me. I'm now asking you the questions that I think you've asked 130 other people. You're a very interesting person, but I think a lot of what is interesting about you is actually not at the office. So I want to spend the rest of our time sort of talking about your hobbies and your interests, your personal life. You do 100%, or maybe that. I don't know.
When you said that at the beginning, I want to be clear. If my wife ever listens to this, she's awesome at breakfast. I want to be crystal clear. I love to cook, if that's where you're going.
Yeah, I was going to ask where that comes from.
I will tell you a funny story. So normally some version of that is like I cooked with my mother or my grandmother, who was like, that's like normally the version. As we established earlier, my parents are both doctors. My mother was the chief resident at Mass General at a time when there weren't that many women doctors going through Mass General, let alone chief residents. My mom's a really remarkable woman. And she'd be the first to tell you, she's like, I couldn't do everything. And she was absolutely uninterested in cooking for the household. It was not her gift. She didn't care about it. It wasn't important. So if I wanted anything that was good, I had to make it for myself. I really enjoy cooking. I enjoy food. I enjoy cooking. And I will say my single greatest pleasure, I love hosting a big dinner party and sitting down over a long boozy dinner with my friends. Like that's my favorite thing to do.
Good conversation.
Exactly. Like I just love that. So I love to do it. My wife is a perfectly good cook. She just doesn't care about it as much as I do and is perfectly happy we divide and conquer. She's an unbelievable hostess, but she doesn't really enjoy the cooking part of it.
It's like, if that's your thing and you love to do that, please take it.
I mean,
and you're a foodie. It sounds like you're a foodie too.
I love it. So Thanksgiving, you mentioned this earlier. I do have like a Excel spreadsheet with like 15-minute increments for the entire day. Like it's
15-minute. Like waking up at 6 a.m.
Like
turkey goes in.
Here's exactly what has to happen at each moment. Like it's military-like precision when you're hosting for 30.
Are you stressed during that period, or you've got jazz on, you're vibing out through the whole thing?
No, in fact, I try very hard never to at least look like or behave like I'm stressed, because I actually think that's one of the cardinal sins of hosting. Like if you look stressed as a host, it brings everybody down.
Everyone's like, can I help?
I also like at this point, it's a little bit of, I've got it down enough to a science that it works out fine. No, I quite enjoy it.
30 guests though? 30?
Somewhere between, it's like 18 to 30 in any given year.
Do people try to get on the invite list and you have to be exclusive about it?
No, everybody's welcome. Okay. We'll wave in random. We had a hilarious one where my nephew brought like his roommate one year from Villanova because he couldn't get home to New Mexico for it or something. It was one of those, like, I don't know, the more the merrier. Thanksgiving's for everybody.
I'll be there this year.
There you go.
You're also on the board of Edible Schoolyard.
I am.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Just also like plug for Edible Schoolyard.
No, please. Yeah, Edible's an amazing organization. So I was thinking about where I wanted to focus my philanthropic activities. And I also really was focused on finding somewhere where obviously money can make a difference, but where it's of a size where I can make a difference too, which is, I think, really important from a board level. I wanted to actually do something. For those less familiar, Edible Schoolyard started in California with Alice Waters, sort of legendary restaurateur herself. And the concept is now throughout schools, public schools in New York City, is they create green spaces, gardens, where things are actually grown, where food is actually produced. And then they teach the kids about food, nutrition, and also use the outdoor spaces for other kinds of classrooms and teaching. It's a wonderful organization that sits at the nexus of two things I care deeply about. I'm a child of public schools in North Carolina, and I feel very strongly about making sure the public education system is incredibly powerful, because I think it's one of the great equalizers in American society. And I've had my own journey and my own health around thinking about food and how to eat better and what matters and all of this. And in many of these communities, there's a real dearth and lack of that Edible really fills. So if you just Google Edible Schoolyard New York, you can find the website, find a lot more information. It's a wonderful organization. And if anybody listening is inspired, please either find me or find somebody on the site and figure out how to get involved.
Sounds very hands-on also. It teaches kids
100%.
Many different
like
types of
literally,
skills.
I mean, when I was contemplating joining the board, I did an afternoon like watching them teach, and it's amazing. They're like out there, they're like harvesting vegetables from their garden. They are going in to cook, and they do some really cool stuff where they'll cook, they'll be in an area that is very diverse, and they'll pick, each week is a different culture's preparation, where here's like the Sri Lankan food one week, and then it's the Jamaican food the next week. And it's awesome. Like they do a really awesome job of combining cultural and food education.
I also just let you know, we'll put a plug about it in our show notes too.
Please.
For those who are interested. I didn't know how deep it ran. That's incredible. So you're just a Renaissance man here, but you grew up playing violin.
I did.
You picked up some guitar, I think, as well, and you're learning mandolin now.
I'm trying to learn the mandolin. It's not that easy, it turns out, but I'm getting there.
No, okay, yeah. Okay, harder than the guitar.
Yeah.
There is a story that I referenced at the beginning about a standing Monday night gig at a bar on Bleecker Street that almost sort of changed the whole course of your life. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, slightly exaggerated, but I'll tell you the story because it's funny. So there was a bar on the corner of Bleecker and Thompson called the Back Fence. It's right down the street from the Red Line for those in New York now.
It's not, is it there
It's
still?
no longer.
Okay,
and it makes me sad because it was one of the great bars in the island of Manhattan. And I say that because they had live music every night, and the only rule was no originals. You could only play covers. And so you'd go in and there'd be some dude ripping out, Bob Seger's night moves. And it was awesome. It was this incredible place.
And did they want that because they wanted people to know the songs? They
Correct.
Didn't want, okay.
Correct. And these guys are like human jukeboxes, like the good ones. Like literally you'd be like, I'd like to hear Neil Young. And they're like, all right, which of these 15 songs do you want to hear? You know what I mean? Like it's incredible. So they had an open mic night and I used to go and play. And to be clear, when I later got an offer, not because of my musical talent, it's because all my friends would come to like heckle me and or support me and then just buy a ton of drinks. And so like I was the guy who would show up at open mic night and bring like a crew, and suddenly it was all working. We had mentioned the job in Boston. I just accepted the job offer and was going to like move up in
so you were deep in your,
kind
of deep in your career.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But I was doing this on the side and, we were about to move to Boston in like a month. And the guy called me from the back fence and said, hey, to be clear, he's like, we've got an opening and it's like 10 o'clock on Monday night. I mean, it was like the least plum assignment of plum assignments. And I literally was like, well, how do I call my wife and tell her that I can't, pursue finance because it's time to, chase my dream of being a rock star.
I've got Monday nights.
Exactly.
10,
yeah.
babe.
You got to start somewhere. No, I quite like it. My children are all musical, enjoy singing and, been in a cappella groups and all this. And I listen, I love music generally, but.
Do they get that from you?
Yeah, I'm definitely more musical than my wife, but everybody brings something to the table. She's a way better athlete than I am, so it's all.
Yes,
everybody brings something.
You go to concerts with your kids too, right?
I do. Yeah, it's funny. I was laughing with somebody about this the other day. I have friends who sort of struggle with teenage children, and I always say to them, I was like, "Well, what do you do with them?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" And you're like, "Well, you got to like figure out ways that, or you can find common ground."
Meet them where they are.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I love going to shows with the kids. It's like my favorite thing to do because I love music, and it's I've got now in a month, I'll have 21, 19, and 17-year-olds.
21,
19, 17.
That's a good age distribution,
it's fun.
too.
Yeah, we were messing around.
Yeah, that's a great age, too, where, you all appreciate the same things. You can talk about it really intellectually.
They're really fun ages, and I love going to shows.
It's not that weird to go to shows with your parents now.
No, exactly.
Totally own it.
Exactly.
I love that. And kind of last one in this section, because I think it's a really interesting part of your whole story, but you said you and your wife met at 18. You got married at 24. You've been together for 30 years. City Pickle, just curious.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to plug that too, because it's so hot right now. Yeah. And she was a pioneer.
I consider myself the first gentleman of pickleball. No, it's a cool story. My wife was a real estate private equity investor. And when we had kids, she decided her call was she wanted to take some time off for-profit work and really focus on the children. And during that time, she was very involved in a number of nonprofits at a real level, not just a sort of contribution financially level, including Room to Grow and Sanctuary for Families here in the city. But sort of once a year would say, I'm not done, right? And I'd say, honey, whenever you're ready, I'm all ears. Sure. And then, the kids sort of had gotten to an age where you get your feet under you a little bit. And we went on a vacation in South Carolina with a couple friends right after COVID, intending to play a bunch of golf and tennis together. And we played a bunch of golf and pickleball. Couldn't have had more fun. And my wife's aha moment, which I give her a lot of credit for, in the suburbs, it's quite easy to put up a pickleball facility indoors. You just find a warehouse somewhere. It's not that hard. Real estate's a huge barrier to entry in dense urban areas where there's boundless demand, but real estate's quite complicated. And it really suited my wife brilliantly. She's obviously was a real estate private equity investor. She's a great athlete. She's a very good racket sports, loves tennis. And so it was really fit a bunch of her interests. And so she partnered up with one of her good friends, a woman named Erica Desai, and the two of them founded City Pickle 4.5 years ago now. So for those in New York, if you followed the pickleball courts in Woolman Rink in Central Park, that's my wife's business. They've got locations in Long Island City. They just opened in Manhattan. She's opening up 100,000 square feet in Boca Raton in the fall. It's really having a moment. And what I love about it, I would say two things. One, if you think about events and corporate outings and things like that, if you played a lot of golf and tennis, those are really fun. But if you haven't, those are really intimidating. And right now, you and I could grab two people out here and have a perfectly fun time playing pickleball together. Hard sport to get great at, but super easy to pick up. I also love it. I find it really cool watching my wife build this, in particular for our kids as a model. Because listen, I love what I do, but there's an opacity to it. It's a very specific finance thing that sort of happens in the ether, right? My wife builds something real that people go and enjoy themselves at and
you can see it.
Yeah, it's tangible in a way that I really love. We were there last night for an event for our kids' school that was just awesome. People had a blast. So yeah, check it out. city-pickle.com is the website.
We'll put that in the show notes too, so people can. It's just for my husband as well, because he's always like, I know we don't play and we play tennis. He's like, but let's order the rackets. Let's just do it. Let's get out. The barrier to entry is so low. And your wife sounds incredible, and I love how you both try to merge your interests into your philanthropic pursuits. But just amazing accomplishment to have that family and be married for so long.
Well, the other funny joke. So we were talking about this earlier that we talk shop all the time, and I am in no way actually affiliated with City Pickle, but I'm a sounding board all the time for her. And so early on, I was like, Mary, I want a business card that has City Pickle on it that says special advisor to the CEO, because that's my job. And she gave me this whole speech. She's like, startup culture, poverty, can't possibly buy something like that for you. Gave me this whole thing. And then for Christmas 2 years ago, she got me the business card. So I now have a special advisor to the CEO card, which I treasure.
When do you pass them out?
Exceedingly infrequently. but I love that I have them.
She's like, we can't afford that.
Yeah, exactly.
On our
she gave me that whole
budget.
speech. Yeah, she's like, culture of poverty. I was like, come on now. It costs $20.
And she's in Florida now too, expanding to other states.
Yeah, it's all happening.
It's really amazing.
It's really cool.
Well, one more before I let you go. This is the question I ask every guest. It's the one I think most about after the episode ends. The question is, what do you wish you had figured out sooner? And that's broad. I'll give you a second, but.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I mean, it's funny. One thing I did get to quickly, and I always say this to my children, there's much of life you can't control. The one thing you can control is your effort. Like hard work is the one thing that you actually have control over. And I look back at the early days in Goldman and like I worked really, really hard because like that was the one, like the only way I could come up the curve was to put in the effort.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that what I did, I don't think I was that well organized or efficient in how I worked early. I think it took me a while. Some people sort of find that much more naturally. It took me a while to like get organized and efficient. And now I'm like maniacal about it. Like,
I mean, what would efficiency look like for you?
Yeah, everybody has their own systems on these things, but I find myself as like a slightly compulsive list taker. I always have reminders set on my phone for things. Like I know my own brain, and sometimes I can, my adult onset ADHD, I'll be jumping around enough that I need to have some lodestone that I can point to. And early on, I was working really, really hard. And I'm not totally sure that I had to in a funny way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or
like maybe not on the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like how to organize your own time, be efficient, and be ruthless about it. I mean, I'm going to give you a super mundane example, but it makes me laugh. My wife and I were joking about this the other day. So I'm on Instagram. It's the one social media that I'm actually on, but I'm like ruthless about who I follow on Instagram. Because if you post too much, or if it's like, I'm like, no, like I don't have time for this. And I'm like, I
1 second.
Totally.
Read it back.
So I consider that like a microcosm of everything. Like I try really hard not to waste time. And we always talk about this. It's by far our most precious resource. We've got capital. We've got all this stuff around. The hardest thing is like, do you manage your team and yourself's time right? So yeah, that's what I wish I'd gotten better at earlier in my career.
And I think that really ties into everything we've talked about today, because a question I'm asking is like, how do you make time for all of this? And people could look at you and say, oh, he's got superpowers. I could never do that. And I think that really is key to this, that you are maniacal with your time and how you prioritize.
It's even like, we think about this all the time with diligence, right? Like when you're looking at a company, the easiest thing to do is to ask 100 questions. But the better thing to do is ask the 40 questions that actually matter. And out of those 40, which are the 10 that are really going to determine the story? Like, I always say this, there's usually like 1 or 2 slides in an 80-slide presentation that actually tell the whole story, right? And it's easier to put together 80 slides than it is to put together 40. Like it just is, right?
Yeah.
And that thing, coaching people to sort of, put in the extra effort to refine it, to tell the story tighter, all of that, I think there's incredible value in that.
That can be widely applied to all aspects of someone's life. It's a great answer. Colbert, thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure other people have. We're going to plug some of those show notes. So again, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me. And I would be remiss if I didn't say I have great respect for your organization. Kent Collier is an old friend and somebody who I think the world of as an executive. So thrilled to see your success and look forward to seeing you continue to grow and expand.
Awesome. Thank you, Colbert.
You're very welcome.
That's a wrap with Colbert Cannon. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who you think should hear it. And follow Octus on LinkedIn and X to keep up with all the exciting things happening across the Octus Podcast Network. And of course, thank you to our producer, Tanya Hubbard, who keeps me and the guests on their toes. I'm Jenny Bain, and this has been People You Should Know, presented by Octus. See you next time.
It's the right time, right place, how I'm loving life these days.